this building was bought from the city as part of a political agenda, certainly not to build a high-volume medical practice. I came here in 2003 when it was broke, virtually bankrupt, couldn't make its next payroll, and immediately I saw that something was wrong. And sometimes you see a project, because I've been doing this work for about 35 or 40 years, helping financially strapped and debilitated healthcare providers regain their footing, and sometimes things are just wrong. You know they're wrong, you don't know exactly why they're wrong, but you know they're wrong. And the more I got into this and began to look through the documentation and develop the history, I was curious to know why a rational bunch of people, a board of directors, would actually buy a run-out old building here that was scheduled for demolition. In fact, it was being torn down at the time. It had been heavily vandalized, full of asbestos, and vacant for about 4 years here in this demolition zone. It defied me until I got into the documentation and began to listen to the stories in town. And the stories in town were very clearly that this was built as part of a political agenda. It was reconstructed. The city attorney was actually the president of this board here, and the board was heavily favored with the mayor. So as a result of that, this postage stamp piece of property ended up with a debt of $1.5 million loan from the USDA. They spent about $400,000 of their own money, and to date, this is May the 5th, 2010, over $2 million have been spent on this building, and it has absolutely no parking to speak of, no patient parking. Well, I'm standing in this roadway, which is a federal industrial highway to service the blue building you just saw, and patients park on it because we have nowhere else for them to park. The property line of this building actually comes to the center of this sidewalk. The sidewalk here is the property line. You can't see it for the locust tree, but patients are forced to park on this roadway because they have nowhere else to park. Now this was part of the original deed. It never had any place to park when it was purchased. And on this building, unlike the pizza place down the street, this has heavily written restrictive covenants in favor of Roane General Hospital to limit the effectiveness of family health care and competing against Roane General. But when you get below that veneer, what you see are restrictive covenants based on helping the city get the building back when Roane County Family Health Care goes out of business. And it almost went out of business in 2003, only about 4 years after the key was turned after the reconstruction project. The story in town was that the mayor and his colleagues wanted family health care to reconstruct this old building, go broke, dump the loan to the USDA, file bankruptcy so the city could get it back for free or nearly free, so that it could become something in the community. My something that it would probably become would be either the mayor's Williams building, or it would be something else that would be like a new city hall. So Chuck Connor going by in the RHEP car going out to the hospital for a healthcare fair. So anyway, that was the story. The place was actually built to fail, and fail it almost did. And it wouldn't have mattered so much about the postage stamp piece of property and no parking if in fact the city owned it, because they own everything else. When Walmart came to town, it made matters worse. And what made matters worse about it was the fact that Walmart needed a piece of the north end of this property, which I will show you now and finish the story. I'm going to pan around quickly so you can see the property directly in front of me is empty, and it has been ever since the state hospital was torn down. which is another piece of the story. I'll move up to the other end so I won't be shooting directly into the sunlight. Okay, here is family health care from a little different angle. $2.5 million almost have been spent to it, well over $2 million and probably $2.5 million. We just got $500,000 in ARRA money, stimulus money. We just spent $50,000 on it and putting a roof on it. We spent $30,000 on it rebuilding the air conditioning tower you see on the south side. And I'm standing here just on the edge of Walmart's property. This land here that you see now is actually city-owned, empty, and part of the old state hospital building that ran right where we're standing right now. This was decommissioned in the late 1980s. This building was purchased in 1996, and Walmart came to town in about 1999. But it is a reality based on an interview and common knowledge here that Mayor Williams actually and his staff, or his accomplices, actually knew Walmart was coming in well before this building was actually built. So I'm going to walk out here in the weeds so that you can see me. And this story here was that Walmart needed a piece of the north end of this parking lot so that it could locate its store. We're facing Highway 33, and the Board of Family Health Care was glad to accommodate the city attorney, who had dropped out of being the board president to represent the Spencer Economic Development Authority. And the premise was that family health care would receive an equal part of land so that it could replace the critical parking that was taken. That never happened. What happened was that the first draft of the plan that was sent to the USDA and signed off on by Mr. Whittier was okay. It moved the property line of family health care out 55 feet from the front of the building and provided for 2 lanes of parking, which would have been fine. Except that by the time the deed got recorded, that was not what happened. What happened was that the architect for family health care had been moved out of the way. The city engineer had been employed to actually develop a parking plan, which was pure fiction. And what family health care actually got for their property, that was the critical piece in putting the Walmart deal together, was 20 feet of their front lawn and no parking. In 10 years, there has been not one car parked on what purported to be an equal exchange of property. It was basically, in my opinion, just a bait and switch operation, because in the meantime, the city built this blue building down here, and they made this front street or road into a federally funded industrial access road. You cannot park on that kind of roadway. You can't even park on a state highway, and that's contained right in the state highway regulations. So anyway, that is pure fiction. So what family health care ended up with was 20 feet of grass that no car could park on. Now, the Spencer Economic Development Authority sold their property, 10 acres, including the piece they got from family health care, for $100,000, and they put that in the bank. And the city of Spencer got all the tax money off Walmart for all these almost 10 years that Walmart has been here. Family health care got nothing more than a parking problem, and that was intentional on the part of the city attorney, slant board president of family health care, and the mayor, and the Spencer Economic Development Authority.